The snow had started falling again by the time Elena Voss arrived at apartment 16. Not the soft kind of snow that made cities beautiful. This was the heavy Berlin snow that turned streets silent and swallowed sound whole. It drifted slowly through the yellow glow of old street lamps covering parked cars and abandoned bicycles in pale white layers. The entire neighborhood looked frozen in time, as though the city itself had stopped breathing. Elena stood across the street with one suitcase in her gloved hand and stared at the apartment building. The structure rose like a dark memory from another century. 6 floors, narrow windows, faded gray walls stained by decades of rain. A weak light flickered above the entrance. For a moment she considered leaving. The feeling came suddenly irrationally tightening around her chest like invisible fingers. Do not go inside. But she was exhausted. Emotionally, physically, spiritually exhausted. And exhaustion always wins, eventually. She adjusted the wool scarf around her neck and crossed the street. The metal gate groaned when she pushed it open. Inside the building smelled faintly of old wood dust, and something colder beneath it. Something damp and forgotten. The kind of smell ancient places carried after too many years of loneliness. Her boots echoed softly against the tiled floor. The elevator was broken. Of course it was. The landlord had warned her earlier through a short, uninterested phone call. 4th floor, apartment 16. Leave the rent in the mailbox on the first week of every month. No welcome. No friendliness. No warmth. Berlin could be like that sometimes, especially in winter. Elena climbed the stairs, slowly dragging her suitcase behind her. The stairwell lights turned on one by one above her, with delayed clicks each illuminating another stretch of peeling wallpaper and rusted railings before darkness swallowed the floor below. By the 3rd floor, she was already breathing harder. Not because of the stairs, because the building felt wrong. Too quiet. She noticed there were almost no sounds from inside the apartments. No televisions, no conversations, no music. It was as though nobody truly lived there. Yet she could feel something. Awareness. The sensation grew stronger as she reached the 4th floor. The hallway stretched long and narrow beneath dim yellow lights. Old framed paintings hung crookedly on the walls, their images faded beyond recognition. Apartment 16 stood at the very end. The black number on the door looked newer than the rest of the building, as if it had been replaced recently. Elena swallowed. Her breath fogged faintly in the cold air. She unlocked the door. The apartment itself was surprisingly large. High ceilings, dark wooden floors, tall windows overlooking the snowy streets of Berlin, beautiful in a melancholic way. The kind of apartment artists romanticize before realizing loneliness became heavier inside places like this. She walked room to room slowly. Living room, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom. Everything was empty except for a few pieces of old furniture left behind by previous tenants. A cracked mirror in the hallway, a dusty bookshelf, and a grandfather clock near the living room window. The clock wasn't moving. Its hands were frozen at 2:06. Elena stared at it for several seconds, then laughed quietly at herself. "You're tired," she whispered. Her own voice sounded strange in the apartment, too small, as though the walls absorbed sound instead of reflecting it. Outside, snow continued falling beyond the windows. By midnight, Elena had unpacked only half her things before giving up entirely. She made tea in the small kitchen and sat beside the living room window wrapped in a blanket watching snow drift over Berlin. Her phone buzzed. A message from Clara. "Did you survive the haunted apartment yet?" Elena smiled faintly. "Barely. You still thinking about him?" The smile disappeared instantly. She locked her phone screen without answering. Because, yes, she was still thinking about him. Lucas. Even after 8 months. Especially at night. Memories became crueler after midnight. That was why she moved here in the first place. New city. New apartment. New beginning. Or at least that was the lie she kept repeating to herself. Around 1:30 a.m. exhaustion finally pulled her towards sleep. She changed clothes, brushed her teeth, and crawled into bed while snow tapped softly against the windows. The bedroom was freezing. She pulled the blankets tighter around herself. For a while, she simply stared into darkness, listening to the old building breathe around her. Pipes creaked somewhere far away. A distant door closed. Then silence returned. Elena slowly drifted towards sleep. Until knock. Her eyes opened instantly. She lay perfectly still. Maybe one of the neighbors. Knock. Knock. 3 slow knocks. Coming from the front door. Elena checked the time on her phone. 2:16 a.m. A strange unease spread through her stomach. Who knocks on someone's door at 2:16 inches the morning? She waited. Silence returned. The logical part of her mind told her to ignore it, but curiosity is a dangerous thing when mixed with loneliness. Eventually, Elena climbed out of bed. The apartment floor felt ice cold beneath her feet. She walked slowly through the dark hallway toward the front door. The grandfather clock stood motionless beside her, still frozen at 2:16. Another knock came. Soft this time. Almost patient. Elena looked through the peephole. Nothing. Only the empty hallway beneath dim yellow lights. She frowned. Maybe someone was playing a joke. The building looked old enough for students or drunk tenants. Still, something felt wrong. Very wrong. She unlocked the door carefully and opened it halfway. The hallway was empty. Completely empty. No footsteps. No elevator sounds. No closing doors. Just silence. Cold air drifted through the corridor. Elena stepped slightly outside and looked both directions. Nobody. Then she noticed something strange. At the far end of the hallway near the staircase, there were wet footprints on the floor. Small footprints, as though someone had walked through snow barefoot. Elena's chest tightened. The footprints disappeared around the corner. She stared at them for several long seconds before quickly stepping back inside and locking the door. Her heart was beating harder now. "This place is getting into your head already," she whispered. But sleep never returned after that. She spent the rest of the night awake beneath blankets listening, waiting, watching the clock on her phone slowly crawl towards sunrise. The next morning Berlin looked gray and lifeless beneath heavy clouds. Elena barely remembered falling asleep around dawn. She woke near noon feeling hollow. The events of the night already seemed ridiculous in daylight. By evening she convinced herself it had been nothing. Old buildings make noises. People wander drunk through hallways. Footprints happen. Normal explanations. That night she worked on illustrations at her desk while jazz music played softly from her laptop. Hours passed. Outside the windows, snow continued falling endlessly over the city. At exactly 2:16 a.m. Knock, knock, knock. Elena froze. The sound was identical. 3 slow knocks. Her blood turned cold instantly. She looked toward the front door. Silence followed. Then another 3 knocks. Her breathing became shallow. "No," she whispered to herself. "No, absolutely not." But she still stood up. Fear and curiosity walked hand in hand. Slowly, she approached the door again. This time, she didn't open it immediately. She looked through the peephole first. The hallway was empty. Except, at the far end near the staircase, someone was standing there. A woman, perfectly still. The yellow hallway lights flickered weakly above her. Elena couldn't fully see her face from the distance. Only pale skin, dark hair, a thin black coat. The woman stood motionless, facing directly toward apartment 16, toward Elena. Elena's pulse hammered violently now. "Hello," she called weakly through the door. No response. The woman didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even breathe. The hallway lights flickered again. For one terrible second, darkness swallowed the corridor. When the lights returned, the woman was closer, much closer. Elena stumbled backward away from the peephole in shock. Every instinct screamed at her not to look again, but she did. Slowly, carefully. The woman now stood only a few meters from the apartment door, and Elena finally saw her face clearly. The world seemed to stop, because the woman looked exactly like her. Same eyes, same lips, same hair. Like a reflection standing outside the door. But wrong. Terribly wrong. Her skin looked pale gray beneath the hallway lights. Her smile stretched too wide. Her eyes looked empty. Dead. Elena couldn't breathe. The woman tilted her head slightly, then smiled wider. The hallway lights suddenly went out again. Darkness consumed everything. Elena gasped and stumbled backward. A second later, the lights returned. The hallway was empty. The woman was gone. Elena slammed the deadbolt shut and backed away from the door, shaking violently. "No!" Her voice cracked. "No, no, no!" She grabbed her phone immediately and opened the building security camera app the landlord had emailed her earlier that day. Hands trembling, she rewound the hallway footage. 2:15 a.m. The hallway was empty. 2:16 a.m. Elena watched herself open the apartment door, step into the hallway, and walk slowly toward the staircase. Alone. There was no other woman, no stranger, only Elena, walking barefoot through the hallway, smiling. Elena did not sleep for the rest of the night. She sat curled in the corner of the living room sofa, beneath a blanket, the pale glow of her laptop flickering weakly against her exhausted face, while snow continued falling beyond the tall windows of apartment 16. Again and again, she replayed the security footage. 2:19 a.m. The hallway empty, the apartment door opening slowly, and then herself stepping outside barefoot into the corridor, smiling. Every single time the footage reached that moment, a cold wave rolled through her stomach, because she remembered none of it. Not the door opening, not walking outside, not smiling, nothing. Around 5 in the morning, Berlin began turning gray beneath the approaching dawn. The snowfall slowed, and the distant sounds of traffic slowly returned to the sleeping city. Elena muted the laptop and stared blankly toward the frozen grandfather clock. Still 2:16. Its unmoving hands now felt less like coincidence, and more like a warning. She finally stood and walked toward it cautiously. The old wood creaked beneath her fingertips. Dust covered the clock's surface. Except for one strange detail, there were fresh fingerprints near the center. Long, thin fingerprints, as though someone had touched it recently. Elena stepped back immediately. "No," she whispered shakily. Her reflection stared back at her from the cracked hallway mirror nearby. Pale face, dark, tired eyes, hair slightly messy from lack of sleep. Still herself. At least she hoped so. Her phone buzzed suddenly in her pocket, making her jump violently. Clara. Elena answered instantly, desperate to hear another human voice. "You sound awful," Clara said immediately. Elena forced a weak laugh. "Good morning to you too. Did you sleep at all?" "No." "You're still thinking about Lucas again, aren't you?" The name hit her chest, like cold water. Elena walked toward the kitchen window slowly while listening to her friend speak. Outside, Berlin looked distant and lifeless beneath fog and snow. "I saw something last night," Elena said quietly. Clara sighed softly. "Elena, I'm serious. You moved into an ancient apartment alone after a breakup while barely sleeping for weeks. Your brain is exhausted. I saw myself standing outside my door. Silence. Then maybe you were dreaming. There's security footage." Another silence followed. This one longer. Finally, Clara spoke carefully. "Come. Stay with me for a few days." Elena closed her eyes. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but another part, a darker, quieter part, did not want to leave apartment 16, and that frightened her most. "I'll be fine," she lied softly. After the call ended, Elena tried convincing herself to act rationally. She showered, made coffee, opened her laptop to work. Normal things, human things. But throughout the day, small details kept unsettling her. A kitchen cabinet she didn't remember opening. Wet footprints near the bathroom door. The faint smell of perfume drifting through the apartment, despite living alone. Not her perfume. Something older. Sweeter. Like wilted roses left too long in water. By evening, snow began falling heavily again. Darkness arrived early over Berlin. Elena worked quietly at her desk, while soft jazz played in the background, though her concentration kept slipping toward the hallway mirror. Several times she caught herself glancing toward it without realizing. Each time her reflection looked normal, but always slightly delayed, just enough to make her doubt herself. At 1:47 p.m., there was a knock at the apartment door. Elena nearly dropped her mug. For several seconds, she simply stared at the entrance, frozen in fear. Then a voice came from outside. Building maintenance. A man. Older. Human. Relief flooded through her so intensely she almost laughed. She opened the door cautiously. An elderly man stood there wearing a dark coat and carrying a toolbox. His tired eyes studied her briefly beneath the dim hallway lights. "You reported heating problems," he asked. Elena frowned. "I didn't." The man checked a clipboard. Apartment 16. Yes. He stared at the paper for a moment before shaking his head. Strange. Something about his expression changed then. Subtle. Uneasy. You just moved in, he asked. Elena nodded slowly. The old man looked down the hallway before speaking again, lowering his voice slightly. You shouldn't stay here long. A chill ran through her instantly. What? But the man merely shook his head again. Forget it. Wrong apartment. Then, he turned and walked away toward the stairwell. Elena watched him disappear downstairs before quickly locking the door again. Her heartbeat had returned. Harder now. You shouldn't stay here long. The sentence echoed endlessly in her mind. At exactly 2:16 a.m. Knock. 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 Elena's blood froze. The sound felt louder tonight. Closer. Almost impatient. She stood slowly from the couch. No, she whispered. The knocking came again. 3 slow knocks. The apartment suddenly felt impossibly cold. Elena forced herself toward the peephole. The hallway appeared empty at first. Then she noticed something horrifying. The woman was standing directly in front of the door, too close for Elena to fully see her face through the peephole. Only one pale eye. Watching. Elena gasped and stumbled backward. The knocking stopped immediately. Silence swallowed the apartment. Then, a soft laugh came from outside the door. Not loud, not aggressive, gentle, almost affectionate. Elena felt tears sting her eyes. Fear had transformed into something worse now. Violation. The feeling that something deeply unnatural was becoming familiar with her. She grabbed her phone and opened the security camera app again. The hallway camera showed the woman clearly this time. She stood motionless outside apartment 16, wearing a black coat while snowmelt dripped slowly from her bare feet onto the floor. Her face remained partially hidden beneath strands of dark hair. Then the woman slowly lifted her head. Elena stopped breathing, because it was her face. Perfectly her face, but older somehow. Sadder. Eyes hollow, with unbearable loneliness. The woman leaned closer toward the camera, and smiled. The video glitched violently. Static filled the screen for several seconds before returning. The hallway was empty again. Elena backed away from the phone, shaking. Suddenly, a noise came from inside the apartment. A soft creak. From the bedroom. Elena turned slowly. Darkness filled the hallway leading toward her room. Another creak followed. The sound of movement inside the apartment. No, she whispered. She grabbed a kitchen knife instinctively and stepped into the hallway. Every floorboard creaked beneath her feet. The apartment seemed darker than before, the shadows thicker somehow. When she reached the bedroom door, it stood slightly open. She was certain she had left it closed. Her breathing became shallow. Very slowly, Elena pushed the door open. The bedroom was empty, but the window was wide open. Snow drifted gently through the curtains into the room. Cold air poured inside, and written across the fogged bedroom mirror were 4 words. You look lonely tonight. Elena stumbled backward in horror. The writing slowly began fading as condensation disappeared from the glass. Then she noticed something else. Her suitcase stood open near the bed. Someone had gone through it. Clothes scattered everywhere. Sketchbooks thrown across the floor. And resting carefully on top of the mess was an old black and white photograph. Elena picked it up with trembling hands. The image showed apartment 16 decades earlier. The wallpaper looked newer, the hallway lights brighter, and standing in front of the apartment door was a woman with Elena's face. At the bottom of the photograph, faded handwriting read, Eva Reinhardt, 1987. Elena's hands began shaking uncontrollably, because beneath the name, someone had written another sentence. She is almost ready. Elena did not remember falling asleep. One moment she was sitting on the bedroom floor clutching the old photograph, with trembling hands staring at the sentence written beneath Eva Reinhardt's name. She is almost ready. And the next gray winter light was pouring through the apartment windows. Morning. For several seconds, Elena simply sat frozen in bed trying to understand how she got there. The photograph was gone. The bedroom window was closed. Her suitcase had been repacked neatly beside the wardrobe as if nobody had touched it. Even the message on the mirror had disappeared completely. Only one thing remained. The smell. that faint perfume drifting through apartment 16. Old roses and cold dust. Elena pressed both hands against her face and breathed shakily. No. She climbed from bed and searched the apartment frantically. Every room looked normal again. Too normal. The grandfather clock still stood frozen at 2:16, but now there was something new resting beside it. A black hairpin. Elena stared at it. She did not own a hairpin like that. Slowly she picked it up. The metal felt freezing cold in her fingers, and suddenly a violent image flashed through her mind. A woman crying beside the living room window. Dark hair, pale skin, hands trembling, snow falling outside. Then another woman standing behind her, smiling. Elena gasped violently and dropped the hairpin onto the floor. The vision vanished instantly. Her breathing became uneven. The apartment was doing something to her. Not haunting her, changing her. By afternoon, Elena could no longer endure being alone. She left apartment 16 for the first time in days and walked through the freezing Berlin streets toward Clara's cafe near the river. The city felt strangely distant. Cars moved. People laughed. Trams rattled through intersections. Life continued normally, yet Elena felt separated from all of it, as though an invisible wall stood between her and the rest of humanity. When Clara saw her enter the cafe, her expression immediately changed. Oh my God. Elena sat heavily across from her without removing her coat. You look sick. I think I'm losing my mind. Clara reached across the table gently. Tell me everything. So, Elena did. The knocks, the hallway woman, the security footage, the photograph of Ava Reinhardt. She even described the sentence beneath the image. She is almost ready. Throughout the story, Clara's face slowly lost color. When Elena finally finished speaking, silence settled between them. Outside the cafe windows, snow drifted softly over Berlin. Then Clara spoke quietly. You need to leave that apartment. I tried. Clara frowned. What do you mean? Elena looked down at her coffee cup. I packed my things last night. Her voice trembled slightly. I remember dragging my suitcase to the door. But when I touched the handle, she swallowed hard. I suddenly couldn't remember why I wanted to leave. Clara stared at her. Elena. And then I woke up this morning in bed again. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Clara stood abruptly. We're going back there. What? You are not staying alone tonight. The sun had already disappeared by the time they returned to apartment 16. The building looked even worse in darkness. Tall, silent, watching. Clara immediately noticed it too. This place feels horrible, she muttered quietly while climbing the stairs. The hallway lights flickered weakly overhead. Apartment 16 waited at the end of the corridor, like a mouth slightly open in darkness. Inside the apartment was freezing. Clara walked room to room uneasily while Elena stood near the doorway. You really live here alone, unfortunately. Clara paused beside the grandfather clock. That's creepy. Elena froze. What? Clara pointed slowly. The clock. Elena turned toward it. Her stomach dropped. The hands were moving, softly ticking for the first time since she arrived. 2, 1, 3, 214, 215. Tick, tick, tick. Elena stepped backward instinctively. It wasn't moving before. Clara forced a laugh. Maybe it was broken. Tick, 216. The clock stopped. Instantly knock, knock, knock. Both women froze. The sound echoed through the apartment like a gunshot. Clara stared toward the door. You heard that too, right? Elena nodded, slowly, unable to speak. Another 3 knocks came. Slow, patient. Clara walked toward the entrance. I'm checking. No. But Clara was already looking through the peephole. For several seconds she said nothing. Then, there's nobody there. Elena felt cold terror crawl through her body. Don't open it. Clara stepped away from the door slowly. Her face had gone pale. There's something wrong with this hallway. The lights outside flickered violently. A soft buzzing filled the corridor. Then a woman's voice whispered faintly from outside the apartment. Elena. Both women froze instantly. The voice sounded almost identical to Elena's. Elena? Clara backed away from the door. What the hell was that? Tears burned in Elena's eyes now, because she recognized the voice. It was the same voice from her dreams, the same voice from the security footage, the same voice that sometimes whispered softly while she tried falling asleep, her own. Suddenly, the apartment lights went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Clara cursed under her breath. "Elena, I'm here." Only moonlight from the windows illuminated the apartment now. Then came the sound, soft footsteps, inside the apartment, moving slowly through the hallway. Not outside, inside. Clara grabbed Elena's wrist tightly. "Tell me, someone else is in here." The footsteps stopped outside the bedroom door. Silence. Then the bedroom door slowly creaked open by itself. A figure stood there, tall, still, barefoot, its face hidden in darkness. Clara whispered, "Oh my God." The figure stepped forward into pale moonlight. Elena felt her entire body go numb, because it was her. Not similar, not close, exactly her. Same eyes, same hair, same scar beneath the chin from childhood. Except for one thing, the other Elena looked peaceful, completely free of pain, free of grief, free of loneliness, free of heartbreak. The version standing in the hallway looked like the woman Elena used to be before Lucas left, before the sleepless nights, before the sadness hollowed her out. The other Elena smiled softly, then looked directly at Clara, and whispered, "She doesn't belong here anymore." Clara screamed. The apartment lights exploded back on violently. The hallway was empty. The figure was gone. Clara grabbed her coat immediately. No, absolutely not. "We are leaving." But when Elena reached for the apartment door, it would not open. The deadbolt turned. The handle moved, yet the door refused to budge, as though something on the other side held it shut. Panic spread instantly through the room. Clara pulled at the handle harder. What is happening? Then the grandfather clock began ticking again. Slow, heavy. Tick, tick, tick. Its hands moved backward now. 216, 215, 214. The temperature inside the apartment dropped sharply. Their breath fogged in the air. And from somewhere, deep within the walls, came dozens of whispers, soft overlapping voices murmuring endlessly. Elena suddenly understood something terrible. The apartment was full, not with ghosts, with people. All the previous tenants, all the forgotten versions, still trapped here somehow. Watching, waiting. The whispers grew louder. Clara backed against the kitchen wall, crying out, "Elena, please." Then all the voices stopped at once. Complete silence filled apartment 16. And in that silence, someone knocked gently from inside the bedroom closet. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock.